Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Why Trust and Data Integrity Are the Cornerstones of AI for the Public Sector. My name is Val Moon. I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology, ICIT, which focuses on securing and making resilient critical infrastructure that provides for people's foundational needs. I'm joined by a very distinguished panel, and I'll have each panelist introduce themselves before we jump into our conversation. Why don't we start with Lauren?
Hi, good afternoon. First, thank you for having me here today to speak on the panel. My name's Lauren Wind. I'm the Acting Deputy Chief Technology Officer here at the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So it's CISA, DHS CISA. And at CISA, we're really leaning into innovation and a secure mission-first posture for AI, data governance, and cloud modernization. I'm really excited to share more throughout our discussion today.
Great. Over to Doug.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Johnson. I run product management for our data modernization area here at Rocket Software. We work with a lot of customers that have a lot of sophisticated systems like many of you here today, and you're facing the discussion around trusting AI. And so here to share some insights of what we've done with other clients and look forward to the discussion.
Great. And lastly, Steve.
And good afternoon or good morning, I guess, if you're out west. My name is Steve Roberts. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here to be on this panel. I am a sales specialist with MFGS Inc., focusing on DevSecOps and information management and governance and other technology areas. My background is from cybersecurity with Hewlett Packard, where we started moving to OpenText and then MFGS Inc. To cater to the public sector, the Department of Defense and civilian agencies as well. We're partnered with Rocket Software. Very excited to be part of this panel.
Great. Well, just a few housekeeping rules. If you look at your screen, there are 4 blue boxes, and if you want to provide a question to us, you can provide one through the chat function. There's also handouts, and there's also links to our bios. And with that, we will get started. So, artificial intelligence is no longer experimental when it comes to government. It's operational. It's shaping how agencies detect cyber threats, allocate resources, modernize services, and make real-time decisions that affect millions of people. But with that power comes a paradox. On the one hand, AI offers unprecedented capabilities to strengthen cyber defense and operational resilience. On the other hand, it introduces new risks: opaque decision-making, model manipulation, data poisoning, and erosion of public trust if systems fail or behave unpredictably. For the public sector, trust is not optional, it is foundational. AI systems are only as trustworthy as the data and architectures that support them. If the data lacks integrity, lineage, or policy enforcement, even the most advanced models become liabilities rather than assets. Today's discussion centers on a simple but critical idea. Trust in AI is built long before a model produces an output. It is embedded in how data is sourced, integrated, replicated, and governed, observed, and protected end to end. Today, we'll be exploring 4 key areas that are essential to deploying AI responsibly and securing the public sector environments. First, the growing trust deficit in AI and how transparency, accountability, and confidence in underlying data can help bridge that. Secondly, how to build resilient AI systems that can withstand manipulation, misfires, and adversarial pressures. Third, why robust data integration and replication strategies are critical to trusted real-time AI decisions, especially in hybrid and multi-cloud environments. And lastly, what's an ideal blueprint look like for embedding policy-driven workflows, data transparency, and system health monitoring into AI systems from day one? So let's get started. Doug, I'd like to start with you. Have you seen with your clients a trust deficit when it comes to AI? What strategies are you employing to help build trust in these systems?
Well, without doubt, there absolutely is a trust issue. The thing that we've kind of seen is at first clients will always think about their architectures with AI. Obviously, there's a lot of exciting discussions happening around models and which model to use and use cases. And that's, of course, critically important. And so it kind of starts with that foundation of a safety first AI approach. Yet what we've also seen is with customers is once you really reach a critical milestone of understanding kind of your architecture set, then you realize, wait a minute, AI needs data. And that data comes from many different places. It's not just one source. And in fact, the more and more it can be leveraged across applications and different contexts, it can hit a lot of your infrastructure. And in that context, what we've seen is challenges of even discovering where is my information, who should have access to it, and making sure in that safety first approach, I can maintain all that carefully curated compliance and governance and approach that we were talking about before in your intro. It's not optional. It's something that has to be done. And of course, though, once you identify the systems and the interactions for the different use cases you want to cater to, there's then that operational aspect to feed the data from the trusted sources where it lives and bringing it into your overall AI architecture itself. And there's approaches we've seen for that that can be really effective because the data isn't in one format, it isn't in one place, it isn't in one system. It's all of your architecture, everything from legacy systems and things that are running critical infrastructure, like perhaps mainframe systems, all the way down to newer systems and everything in between that are driving those workflows. And then lastly, we've seen that organizations that are really taking this seriously aren't just thinking about their first project, but they're thinking about how can I automate and create feedback systems so that everything that I was kind of sharing from the safety first AI to how can I discover information and where data is in my organization systematically, all the way down to how it's operationalized all in one fell swoop. If it's useful, I could share some use cases, or we could go on to some other topics. I don't know if you had some other things. Want to make sure I'm mindful of our agenda today.
Yeah, why don't we go around and ask a few more questions, then we can come back to that. You actually, Doug, brought up this idea of critical infrastructure. And, I work in the critical infrastructure space, and resilience is a big buzzword in that space. So, Steve, I'd like to turn to you and ask you, how do you think about building resilience when it comes to AI systems?
That's a great point. From my background as a cybersecurity ArcSight engineer in the past, and going to DoD clients, Intel clients, and all sorts of public sector clients, just watching the security operations centers get lit up. We're operating in contested environments, right? So resilience has to be front of mind, particularly with artificial intelligence, where the speeds are exponential now. The AI has to be trustworthy, because if it's not trustworthy, the commanders in the field aren't going to use it, and public sector is not going to trust it for public sector issues. These systems need to fail safely. It needs to be built in to the applications. It cannot be a bolted on type of solution. So governance needs to be worked in, and governance is starting to appear, which is nice for resilience and for these trusted AI systems. The risk management frameworks, the first one for AI, version 1.0 is out. The NIST is also looking at doing an overlay to the 800-53 controls. Actually, they're more than looking at it, they're implementing it, which is really good. It's a smart move, because the 800-53 controls are used throughout the public sector. Other things that we're seeing are the OWASP controls are now utilizing artificial intelligence or providing solutions to AI. And I tell you, the environment is just so fast and going crazy. Back when I started looking into this webinar, which was, we were looking into this for a while ago. It's been a few months. I was looking at pretty much generative AI type of controls. Just recently, the whole thing is agentic AI and agents talking to each other and agents building data and agents like Maltbot having communities. So we need AI self-healing itself, and that's really where we're going. But that needs to be governed. So strict governance is very important for resilience. The models, of course, have to be protected, but the data is the one thing that really needs protection, because without um, trust in that data, those models and that AI won't be used throughout our public sector.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Doug, you mentioned a little bit when just prior to Steve's discussion about data, you talked about how the data sources are going to be coming from many different places. And so, why is robust data integration and replication strategies critical to trusted real-time AI decisions, especially when you consider the hybrid and multi-cloud environments that we work in now?
Yeah, well, it's really critical, a replication strategy, because it's practical. Your data isn't in one place, and yet your hungry AI needs need that access. And so the challenges of getting access to that information isn't just a one and done. You need a system that continually brings the latest data, including retiring old data, bringing new data into the systems. And this can cover systems like, for instance, mainframe systems, where maybe the data has been in a legacy format, like a vSAM file or other kind of technically not very modern formats. But your AI systems can't consume that data in those formats. You need a replication strategy that can bring the data securely and safely to the right place, but then also present it in a format that is AI ready, both in terms of compliance and in terms of the formats and the systematic way that it works. And so that's one of the reasons is it's super practical. There is no shortcut to making your entire architecture work together. But the other thing is, I would say that the other thing that's a consideration here is your needs will change. And so as you think about the architectures and the way that this operates, the system you put together today to feed AI is going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. You're going to have new systems that come along, new forms of data that you want to bring into the fold. And having a good replication and synchronization strategy really helps you give confidence as you have new applications that are on board. For instance, we have customers that have 10, 20 different data types that we're syncing and replicating through many different footprints, from cloud to premise systems, that really help make all that smooth, from modern to the proven systems that one might have. And lastly, I would just say that having a unified replication strategy also simplifies compliance. What can happen is, if you take a piecemeal approach by having 10, 20 different vendors trying to satisfy the same needs, when you might be able to look at a single vendor solution, it really can simplify your security architecture, both in terms of skills and deployment, but also just the practicalities of bringing over those access controls and having one architecture that brings it all together.
No, that makes sense. And I want to pull on that thread, Lauren, about architectures. And then also, I know Steve had mentioned when it comes to resiliency, a governance structure is so important. So when you think about building AI systems at CISA, what is the ideal architecture for embedding policy-driven workflows, data transparency, and system health monitoring into AI systems from the onset?
Thanks, Val. I think that my partners here on the call have said snippets of that, and I'm just going to pull them all together on the story. But here it says one of the biggest things before you can really start on the ideal architecture is making sure you're ready for it, right? And so this past year, CISA has invested in IT modernization to ensure all of our future AI functions and tools are mission ready on day one. So this past year, CISA successfully completed a new CISAnet migration, consolidating all of our IT services under the CIO through a secure cloud managed network and unified technical support to test and scale AI functionality in this controlled environment, which also helps on the lakehouse side and the data governance and lineage that I'll get in. So while we think of an ideal AI architecture or integrating AI systems at CISA, the ideal architecture starts with zero trust principles. And I'd like to foot stomp this policy as code, right? You can't just add it on at the end and think it's going to be okay. You need to start with understanding what your guardrails are, and then you can build at scale, right? Which is what Doug and Steve said as well. So a few things here is one, policy driven workflows at your core. And you'll probably hear this again throughout this presentation, right? But policies shouldn't live like in a PDF on our workbooks, right? We need to start to codify them and enforce them automatically. This means that for every AI pipeline or function that we start to build and develop, we're thinking through the data ingestion, the model training, all of our inference at the very beginning. So the compliance is hit before we're even starting to test these models. Then it gets to our data governance. We've invested a lot into lakehouse management and understanding sort of where Doug and Steve said, you can have all these clients with all this data, but if they don't talk to each other and they're on different machines, how can the AI actually work, right? And so you need to start looking at your data governance and lineage through the entire life cycle of that AI project, right? So this could look at, we're implementing our real-time dashboards to look at source data. When we see anomalies, is that pinging, right? And can we start to do some proactive instead of reactive decisions based on our data feeds and streams for our models? And then lastly, and Steve already said this, it's sort of self-healing at this point, right? We want to set up those guardrails and some of those policies that if something starts to ping in our model or the results just aren't what we already considered, like it should start to, the model should be smart enough to say, hey, this is an anomaly. Let's start to roll it back or put some checks in place, and then have, our human teammates come in and see what's going on. And so this is really important as CISA and others, whether you're your government or your private sector, start to really invest in your cloud environments and take things at scale, because we'll have more risk, right? And so you want to really buy down that risk. So I'd say policy first, then we got to look at the data, and then be resilient by design, and think of that at the beginning and not at the end.
No, that's great. Thanks for that. Steve, let's get back to this idea of integrating data across, having worked at both the FBI and CISA, there are so many different compartmented data sources everywhere within those agencies. And so integrating that data across these legacy systems and cloud platforms and edge environments is a challenge. And what do you consider when you're facing and you're helping an agency face a challenge like that?
We're finding the core challenge isn't so much technology, but it's, again, the trust of the data and the data boundaries. The process has been used for a while. It's a lot of the same blocking and tackling. So you have the whole CIA triad needs to be protected, and using governance. Very much what Lauren said. And it's exciting, some of the governance that's going on, but it needs to go faster. When we're looking at different integration challenges, the agencies are moving, between systems that really weren't designed to share context and lineage. So, like Doug was saying with the rocket solutions, these legacy systems, they may lack the metadata, so you need the solutions to go ahead and have and to enhance that stuff for observability, for this AI speed. It's all about the integration layer now, because we have cloud data. This is the federal government. Data is everywhere. Data in the mainframe, data on open systems, at all different areas, data on the edge, right? So we need to manage this data rot. That's the obsolete, the trivial, and what's that old data, right? And really the way that we're looking to do that these days is building these data sets. That's called retrieval augmented and generated data, and that's for integrating all these different data pieces. So they're duplication. The data is fresh, and the data is trusted. Um, Again, what Lauren said, it all kind of touches upon zero trust now. The good thing is a lot of these things are being implemented, but now it needs to be a whole self-serving system. The one thing that came out recently, I think it was during the summer of Katie Arrington, it was the cybersecurity risk management construct, which is sort of an addition to the risk management framework, which is these 4 or 5 pillars of build, of design, build, test, run, and monitor. They're very similar to the MFGS Inc. Model that we use, the mission dominance model that we apply as well. So these types of frameworks and guardrails that was mentioned, they need to be implemented. They need to be self-healing, and it needs to be built into the system. It can't be bolted on because the risks are too high, and things are just going too rapidly in speed.
I have to say that it's so great to hear all of you guys talk about how security needs to be built in. Being at CISA and working on Secure by Design, it just warms my heart to hear you all talk like this. Lauren, getting back to this idea, and it's really encouraging to hear that you guys are thinking about how you automate some of the compliance work that's been going, that will need to be monitored and assessed as you implement these AI systems. But I know that CISA has many different stakeholders, that own different data sets, and there's not always, and sometimes they can feel very parochial or territorial about those data sets and how they might be used or not used. And so I'm just wondering, what are some of the cultural barriers that you guys have had to work through, and how have you worked through that to ensure that when this is a whole new technology that's implemented across the agency affecting all of these data sets, how are you helping to kind of bring the workforce along with you as you try to implement these things automatically, like you're saying, and from the beginning and not bolted on afterwards?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Val. At the end of the day, a lot of people say, "This is my data, right? What are you going
Yes,
to do with
me
my
too.
data? What models are going to ingest it or be trained on it in the future, right?" And so, just understanding that everything that we're building at CISA is on our own system, right? It's not anything that we build in house or we're using, our industry partners or other types of models that are out there. And we have our own version of ChatGPT. It's called CISA Chat, but all these things that we're teaching from a mission perspective of supporting our stakeholders and customers throughout the cybersecurity division or the infrastructure security division, that all remains on our system, right? That's the whole reason we went through IT modernization. The other part there I'd want to hit on, Val, is it's the culture shift of it's okay to share your data, right? And in CISA, it's not technically one person's data, right? It's the government's data. And if we can change that culture shift, and in our lake house,
Yeah.
we can start to say this data that maybe we've been procuring or sitting on or have been analyzing with one mission perspective for the last 5-10 years, we just add this other data lens on top of it. Wow, look at what we can accomplish now. And so I think that sort of goes back to the compliance of automatically thinking about how we're using data and what needs to be done. For example, if you're using something that is critical infrastructure and it can't be shared with a lot of people, or it's like chemical sector or energy sector, right? You'll have those our own guardrails it sort of goes back to my first point of you embed the policy first. So anytime, from a contracts or personal data, HR type of model, right? Or where we're keeping that data, like if it has any PII, which means personal identification information, like the model already knows it's never going to be shared, right? It's always going to be masked. So those are some of the guardrails you can put in there. But also it's roles-based access control too. There's something very sensitive or confidential. We don't want everyone to see that, right? But there is a lot of value in connecting those sort of data silos that we had before, which is why we've been focusing since on the last year of really standing up our lakehouse environment. So our data is in the same structure, and we can start to automate and scale our AI and machine learning capabilities faster.
No, that's great. And then, just to pull the thread a little bit more on the governance issues and monitoring issues, how do you look at monitoring AI systems, or do you look at monitoring AI systems differently than traditionally the way that we monitor IT systems?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both there, Val.
Okay.
You should monitor our AI systems with the same sort of caveats of, there's a security threat, right? There could at any time be an actor or a bad threat in this model, right? In the system, in this network. So someone like the biggest things from a CISA perspective is the governance. As much as we want to automate it, it's not coming from a static place, right? It's continuously monitoring and having those QA/QC checks. And so from our perspective, there's about 5 things I can share with you. And the first is looking at your data signals, right? If you see that your cloud compute is soaring or is turned off, there might be something there that you want to check, right? Or you can track the lineage of who has access to the data, what are they doing. If you have like a ton of like API hits, that's probably something you need to check into that you might not have had before. And also look at your sort of your metrics and the results coming out of your models, right? If what you're getting is off from what you normally get, like you have to look at your training data, maybe model shift, etc. And then it's looking at your model performance, right? And that sort of goes on what I already said, is you have to monitor the accuracy of the model. I think a lot of times we're using what's coming out of generative AI, right? And it's so helpful all the time. But if you're not in there reading and actually putting your mind to the paper there and teaming with it, it could get some things wrong, right? And so you have to look at some of those outputs and also think about, again, the adversary or the threat actor. Are they already in my model, right? If they already are, could it be some of that data poisoning and control? And that's where you get to security and access control. So you just look for the anomaly of your patterns. Again, like I said, if you have a lot of API abuse or other, and these are sort of indicators of automated governance, right? You can just let the machine tell us when these things are happening. A lot of the things we do on the network side of the house as well, right? This is in the cybersecurity. It's looking at your audit logs, right? And seeing if there's any anomalies before or after. And it really gets us to that proactive versus reactive posture of, oh no, we already have the threat, right? Or the adversary is already in the system, or maybe we can stop it on that front end. And then looking at if a failure does happen, what are your automated policies, procedures, guardrails that, okay, we have a failure, we have something, an anomaly in the system. What are we going to do? What are we going to do right now? Be proactive, have that plan ready to go, because it's probably going to happen, right? And so I think those are the types of governance signals, those 5 things that we're putting in real-time dashboards, right? So at any type of our models or our infrastructure side of the house, we can go to in real time and start to see, okay, this is where we need a check, or no, the system's great. We're okay for right now in the current phase.
Great, thanks for that. Since this whole webinar is about building trust in AI systems, Doug, let's get back to this issue. I wanted you to pull the thread a little bit on transparency. So how should public sector leaders think about transparency differently than the private sector, especially when AI decisions affect rights, access, enforcement? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, the way I kind of think about it is there are things that are the same and there are things that are different. I think the things that are the same are really the scale of the problem. Many in the public sector that we've worked at, they acknowledge that they need to really look at not just the AI itself, but the things that feed the AI and how can I be informed about what my systems are doing. And that's where automation is super important. Lauren, I love what you said earlier around policy as code. And what we've seen both in public and in the private sector is sometimes that code hasn't been touched in a long time. And what is it actually doing? What is my policy? I know what it is on this piece of paper, but what does the actual code say? And that's where Rocket has deployed some technologies with our customers, both in public sector and private, where it helps automate that lineage. What is the application doing? What data does it have? What applications are talking to other applications? And it's not just guessing. It's actually looking at your code and helping understand those policies and providing then a user experience that tell you about those critical data elements and what stakeholders are interacting with that data. And so it acts as a tool for teams to talk about as they're planning AI. And that really fits into kind of a human-centered AI design that Rocket likes to think about. And that's really kind of what's the same, but what's different? Well, in the private sector, we've seen some pretty significant budgets in terms of change and modernization, particularly with legacy systems. And in the public sector, we see this challenge, which does exist in the private sector too, but it's even more amplified. And the skills issues around dealing with the data in these legacy systems is quite massive. And this ties back to what we've seen from others is who have a best practice of kind of looking at ways of surfacing that data in modern ways, but yet still being able to trust the data through some of those synchronization capabilities and replication that I was highlighting earlier, can be a real powerful strategy in the public sector to unlock that data and give you trust in an automated fashion end to end. So I hope that helps.
No, that does. That does. And Steve, when we think again about this idea of resiliency, and you think about how desirable AI systems are to malicious actors, and we've actually seen cybercrime go increase, with this past year, with making the barriers to entry, unfortunately, to cybercrime lower with AI. How can agencies detect early warning signals that an AI system is being manipulated or is making decisions based on degraded or compromised data?
Well, with these AI systems, manipulation, it really shows up in the behavior of the model, and not so much the outcomes and tracking that behavior. The inconsistent outcomes, from the model, misfires, hallucinations. Again, that's a sign of data that's either been compromised, data rot, and there's some great tools, particularly from Rocket, that can mitigate those risks, and it's amplified in the public sector because the data is so dispersed rather. Like I mentioned, from mainframe to cloud to edge. So those need to be controlled and governed. We spoke a lot about governance. Lauren, of course, did because she has to implement these. But not only are we affecting governments and utilizing tools to impact cybersecurity from the threats that are being AI is impacting those threats from the bad actors. But now we have suites of solutions that we help with Rocket, and from cybersecurity solutions to information management and government solutions, and DevOps solutions that are taking into account all these different governance perspectives, that are being published, from DevOps to the different models that are out there to go ahead and control this data drift, and to recognize the drift and to recognize the hallucinations and the misfires, to create these RAG type systems that I mentioned, these retrieve augmented governed generated solutions. So trustworthy in the AI, it really brings to the surface uncertainty and triggers, make sure it triggers human reviews. So the human in the loop still needs to be the case. And of course, the human in the loop would be for approval. But now with the dynamics and the speed, we're moving to human on the loop, right? To observing what AI is happening. But in any case, there needs to be oversight because things are happening very fast, and these AI systems are self-monitoring themselves. So we still need to have human control. Okay.
Well, that makes sense. When you consider deploying AI systems, or like what do you do to test AI systems for resilience before you deploy them, especially in environments where, and most government agencies, there is, there's going to be some nation state interest and also criminal malicious actors' interest in getting into these systems.
Well, for deploying these AI systems, again, you need to make sure they're governed and they're built with these controls in place. We're not going to bolt it on. You're going to measure, you're going to monitor. Those are kind of the hygiene and the best standards that we've been using for a long time. The different controls that are maturing from, I mentioned OWASP controls. What's kind of neat now, there's a whole constitution from Anthropic of ethical AI, and there's so much to consider. So the solutions are maturing, and they need to have those built with those in mind, and they are. Um, but we need to harden down these governments, these guardrails, and all this needs to be, the blocking and tackling. It needs to be implemented, it needs to be monitored, and it needs to be reacted upon.
That makes sense. Lauren, when you think about CISA, and as we talked about, there's lots of sources of data, right? And legacy systems that are running across the agency, from the infrastructure security division to the cybersecurity division. So when you think about integrating this data across legacy systems, the new cloud platforms and edge environments, what do you think? What was the biggest challenge, or what is the biggest challenge as CISA moves towards modernization and integrating AI into its systems?
I'm glad you asked me this question, right? So before I came over here in the CIO CTO office, I was the branch chief of data solutions and architecture over at the National Risk Management Center, which is a subdivision of CISA, right? And that's the biggest thing to tackle. And I think it starts with your data cataloging, right? And understanding what data you have, what gaps you need for the mission, and what is your data governance and management plan. And what I could give advice to a lot of people out there is you don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Data management ideology and theory has been around for a long time, right? We're just gotten better at like procuring the different platforms that are out there to make this automated, right? And govern in the right way. There's no world now in which your data that lives in your lake house or is managed, by your RBACS controller, your user controls, your AI model or whatever machine you're building towards can build right on top of that, right? And understand that and have those sort of data defined guardrails to start with. And so I guess from my perspective is the hardest part before you start building really cool things and wanting to be innovative is doing that foundational unified data management and ecosystem. If you don't have that to start on, right, your foundation is weak and your model will fail, right? And so that's what I would do. You leverage some of the policies that are out there already, see what data you're working with, and then get your lakehouse or your data management ecosystem in line. And then you can start to build and just ensure that you have that continuous quality assurance, quality control of your data. The worst thing to do, and this is also a part of culture. So I think there's probably a few people on the call that says, it's really easy to say that, but to actually do that and to get people to, not maybe hide or silo their data, right, is to really understand that accountability and having it in a system that it will teach the user to use the data in a governance way, right? We need to get away. This is something that I talk about, and I'm sure we could do an entire panel on analytics, right? And the next gen of analytics out there, but we have to get away from downloading an Excel or a CSV of static data, putting it on your own machine, running your local R, your Python script, running your own model, and saying, this is our new data. Like we need to govern and track that lineage of the data so we know that the QA/QC, whether that's cyber network logs or infrastructure risk and resilience or critical infrastructure dependency data, or if you think about it from the business side, like our contracts and finance data. So it's sort of getting your data house aligned and on foundation before you get started there. That's what I would say, Val.
Great, thanks for that. Doug, let's talk a bit more about the trust deficit. And, audits can play an important role in that. How does audits build trust, building trust with regulators and oversight bodies? Like when you think about that and thinking about what agencies need to do to ensure that they do have the right record keeping in place so that an audit can go smoothly, that they are complying with whatever regulatory rules that they have to comply with, and where do you see the agencies kind of fall short with some of that, because it's a lot for them, right, to keep up with. And as we've already mentioned, a lot of these agencies are dealing with legacy systems and legacy data that they're trying to put into these systems. So just wonder what your thoughts are on where agencies might fall short and how we might be able to, or companies like yours can help with making bridging that gap.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's kind of two gaps that I've seen. One is many times when we think of kind of auditing, we kind of think of, hey, go show me, prove to me in the system that X and Y happened, right? That the logs of the system and that your security policies are being honored, and being able to have that provability within the systems. And this is where Rocket has some very interesting technologies with this. We've recently introduced Rocket Eva, which is our architecture and solution for aided AI conversations, that has a very flexible architecture in terms of plugging into different LLM approaches, and most importantly, into some of the hardest to reach data, things like on the mainframe. So we provide kind of a means for being able to securely have conversations with your operational environment to get those kind of insights. So it helps the compliance teams get that data very quickly, everything from incident management to actually that provability. Then there's the other side of it, is in addition to kind of the operations aspect of it, then there's also kind of the policy aspect of it, proving to the compliance teams that as you're changing systems, as there's new data that comes in your environment, old data gets retired, that you know what is actually happening in those systems from a policy perspective. And this is where we've automated that from some of the discussions that my esteemed colleagues have kind of shared today. Things like using lineage and automation technology, not at runtime, but actually when you actually change the systems, that it updates automatically what's actually going on in the systems, and laying it out in a view so the auditing team can see that very clearly, see the entire lineage of what the applications and the data was doing, and 6 months later it changed to X or Y. And so it helps you scale and not make auditing an afterthought or a scary thing, but oh yeah, well, we have that automated and you want to see the view. It just hits the kind of the easy button.
Got it. Well, as a final question for all the panelists, I want to ask each of you to provide the audience with one actionable takeaway that they might leave today's discussion with. And I'll start with you, Lauren.
One actionable takeaway. Well, I'm trying to think, because we've all had the same similar themes, and that might be you're just a very good moderator, Val. The one that I would take away for the team here is codify governance as code and integrate it into your AI workflows on day one, right? If you're not starting with that, and I think we were saying it earlier, like policy as code, but our posture at CISA consistently shows that trust and compliance cannot be just an afterthought. They must be embedded at that architecture level, right? And so it has to do a lot of collaboration with your enterprise architects and engineers from the very beginning. And by implementing policy as code, agencies can automate that enforcement, just like Doug was saying on the tool, right? of all the legal and operational and mission requirements across the AI lifecycle, right? And so that just automatically starts to ensure that our data ingestion, our model training, our inferences all pass through the correct compliance gates, and it can be done automatically. And the flags will come up, like if it doesn't work, right, and it goes against a policy, what can you fix now and have continuous assurance that your model is going to be at standard later on. So that would be the one thing. Codify your policy from day one.
That's great. Steve.
Yeah, we're entering a bold, exciting new world. A little bit dystopia, but get your data prepared, because that, I think, is the largest risk. There's a lot of great solutions out there that are being developed, particularly from Rocket, for these legacy systems that should remain. There's no reason. It's not very cost effective to move everything to a central repository. It's fine to keep it where it is. They're tried, true, delivered, these legacy systems that can integrate with the cloud and the edge. But make sure that the data is trustworthy, and using content and different control mechanisms that's being published to make sure that it's deduplicated, it's the data that you're expecting, and there isn't malintent with that data happening. And the governance and the tools are out there to assure that. So make sure you all do that.
Got it. And last, over to you, Doug.
Great stuff. I think I'll just leave us with one word that amplifies what my colleague said is once you've done these things around that kind of safety first approach, threading your data, then you want to make sure you have automation. This is not one AI project. It's not this year's deliverable. It's the impact that your organization and departments are having for the long term. And the only way you're going to scale is through automation.
Got it. Thank you. And I want to thank Rocket for sponsoring this webinar today, and SC Media and CRA for hosting our discussion. And as we leave today's discussion, I hope that one theme was made clear. Trust in AI is not something you add on later. It's something you have to engineer deliberately. For the public sector, responsible AI isn't about smarter models. It's about verifiable data lineage, resilient architecture, enforceable policy controls, and continuous visibility into health systems and behavior. When agencies invest in strong foundations like replication, integration, governance, observability, they don't just reduce risk, they enable AI systems that are explainable, auditable, and worthy of public trust. AI will continue to transform government operations. The question is not whether agencies will use AI, but whether they can do so confidently, securely, and transparently. Thank you all panelists for sharing your expertise and your time with us this afternoon. Thank you to the audience for joining us today, and really hope this session helps you move from experimenting with AI in operations to experimenting with AI to operationalizing it at every stage of your modernization journey. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the afternoon.